What if I told you that your greatest enemy is not the person who betrayed you, not the system that held you back, not even the struggles you're facing right now, but your own brain? Because if you don't learn to control your brain will control you. Your brain is a servant, not a master, and yet most people live their entire lives as though the opposite were true. They allow their thoughts to dictate their moods to dictate their choices, and their choices to dictate their results. And then they wonder why life feels like an endless cycle of frustration and limitation. The truth is, your brain is powerful beyond measure, but it was never designed to be in charge of you. It was designed to be directed by you. When you recognize that distinction, you step into a level of control over your destiny that most people never experience. The mind is like an obedient worker waiting for orders, but if you never give it commands, it defaults to the easiest and most comfortable path, which usually leads to mediocrity, fear, and stagnation. When you see your brain as a servant, you begin to understand that you are the one with authority, the one with the power to issue instructions, the one who decides whether the servant builds a palace of purpose or a prison of regret. Think about it. Your brain does not decide what thoughts it entertains. It responds to the inputs you allow. If you constantly feed it negativity, it learns to serve negativity back to you. If you surround yourself with environments of small-mindedness, your brain adapts by shrinking your vision. But if you deliberately plant seeds of belief, resilience, and vision, your brain becomes fertile soil that multiplies those seeds into reality. That's because the brain follows patterns, and patterns are built by repetition. As a servant, it obeys the orders given through consistent habits and focus. If you instruct it daily to dwell on possibility, creativity, and solutions, it will faithfully find ways to deliver those results into your life. But if you remain unconscious, if you let the servant run wild without instruction, then you will find yourself reacting instead of creating, surviving instead of thriving, and drifting instead of driving. The problem is that most people don't even realize their brain is serving something at all. They think they are their thoughts, when in fact, they are the masters who have simply forgotten to issue commands. When fear rises, they assume fear is in control. When doubt whispers, they assume doubt has the final word. But fear and doubt are not masters. They are signals. They are the echoes of the servant brain recalling old instructions, often inherited from childhood, society, or trauma. The real power comes when you wake up to the fact that you can override those signals by choosing to speak new instructions. You can literally reprogram your servant to obey a new vision. This is why affirmations, visualization, meditation, and consistent goal setting are so powerful. They are tools for giving the brain new orders, training it to align with who you are becoming instead of who you have been. When you recognize your brain as a servant, you stop taking every thought as truth. You start asking, who gave this order? Who programmed this belief? And you realize that many of the limitations you carry were never chosen by you. They were handed down, absorbed, or conditioned into your servant brain, and now it's running on outdated code. But the beauty of it being a servant is that you can rewrite the code. You can update the program. You can retrain your brain to work for your vision instead of against it. This requires awareness, because servants left unattended tend to follow old routines, and if those routines are rooted in fear, scarcity, or laziness, then your brain will continue serving those patterns faithfully. It takes intentional daily effort to give it new commands, to insist on a higher standard of thinking, and to refuse to let the servant masquerade as the master. This shift changes everything. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One sees it as impossible, the other as an opportunity. The difference isn't in the challenge itself, it's in how the servant brain was trained. The first person's brain was trained to serve fear, to magnify obstacles, to protect comfort. The second person's brain was trained to serve faith, to search for solutions, to prioritize growth over ease. Both brains are serving, but only one master has taken authority. The servant is neutral. It will serve whatever it's told to. It doesn't care if it serves your weakness or your strength, your excuses or your excellence. That's why you must be vigilant in your instructions, because the servant will carry them out with precision. Your brain is like a loyal worker who never complains and never questions. It doesn't ask, "Is this belief true?" It only asks, "What is my master commanding me to do?" If you tell it that you are unworthy, it will search for evidence to confirm it. If you tell it that you are unstoppable, it will search for evidence to prove that as well. It is the most faithful servant you will ever have, and that means your responsibility as the master is immense. Too many people underestimate the authority they carry. They wait for their brain to feel motivated before they act, when the truth is, their brain is waiting for them to issue the command to act. They wait for confidence to appear, when confidence is built by ordering the brain to move despite fear. They wait for clarity, when clarity only comes after you instruct the brain to pursue vision with focus. When you finally take the posture of the master, you stop negotiating with your servant. You stop listening to its excuses, its recycled fears, its lazy instincts. You recognize them for what they are, the echoes of an old program, and you replace them with orders that align with your purpose. You understand that your brain does not set your ceiling, your instructions do. Your brain does not decide your limits, your commands do. And the more you exercise authority, the more disciplined, sharp, and obedient your servant becomes. Over time, it begins to anticipate your commands, aligning your habits, your emotions, and your focus with the vision you've chosen. That's the power of understanding that your brain is a servant, not a master. Every destiny begins with a thought, and yet most people underestimate just how powerful a single thought can be. Thoughts are not just fleeting sparks that pass through the mind. They are the architects of reality. Every decision you make, every action you take, and every result you experience is rooted in the thoughts that first occupied your mind. If your thoughts are weak, your actions will lack conviction, and your results will mirror that weakness. If your thoughts are expansive, bold, and disciplined, your actions will carry a force that pushes past resistance and creates outcomes that align with greatness. This is why it is often said that what you think about consistently, you eventually bring about, because thoughts are the seeds from which the harvest of destiny grows. A person cannot rise higher than the level of their dominant thoughts, because those thoughts shape their self-image, their habits, their resilience, and ultimately the trajectory of their life. Consider for a moment how a dream is born. Before it becomes a goal written on paper, before it becomes a plan of action, before it becomes a tangible achievement, it exists only as a thought. That thought, however fragile it may seem at first, carries the potential to alter an entire life. The invention of airplanes, the building of skyscrapers, the breakthroughs in medicine, and the revolutions in technology all began as nothing more than a thought in someone's mind. If those individuals had dismissed their thoughts as impossible or insignificant, the world would look very different today. The truth is, thoughts either empower you or imprison you, and whichever you allow to dominate will determine the quality of your destiny. A person who entertains thoughts of defeat and limitation will never step boldly into opportunities, while one who entertains thoughts of victory and possibility will always find a way to rise above challenges. The danger is that many people assume thoughts are passive, but in reality, they are active forces that shape the lens through which you see the world. If your thoughts are rooted in fear, you will interpret every situation as threatening. If your thoughts are rooted in abundance, you will see opportunities where others see scarcity. This mental filter becomes self-fulfilling because your actions align with your dominant beliefs. For example, someone who constantly thinks, "I'm not good enough," will subconsciously sabotage their efforts, avoid taking risks, and miss chances for growth. On the other hand, someone who thinks, "I was created with purpose," will move with confidence, attract opportunities, and persevere through setbacks until success becomes inevitable. The difference between these two outcomes lies not in external circumstances, but in the thoughts that were allowed to take root and grow. What makes thoughts even more powerful is their ability to multiply. A single thought, when dwelled upon, breeds similar thoughts. Fear breeds doubt. Doubt breeds hesitation, and hesitation breeds failure. Conversely, faith breeds courage, courage breeds action, and action breeds progress. This compounding effect means that the trajectory of your destiny can be traced back to the dominant patterns of thinking you nurture daily. If you feed your mind with negativity, criticism, and self-pity, your destiny will be marked by smallness and regret. If you feed your mind with vision, gratitude, and discipline, your destiny will expand with influence and fulfillment. You cannot plant seeds of weeds and expect a harvest of fruit, just as you cannot plant thoughts of defeat and expect a destiny of victory. Another critical truth is that thoughts are magnets. They attract people, circumstances, and outcomes that match their frequency. A person who constantly thinks about problems will always find more problems to focus on, while someone who trains their mind to dwell on solutions will naturally attract ideas, resources, and allies that propel them forward. This is why two people can enter the same situation and experience completely different outcomes. One sees limitation, the other sees opportunity. One thinks lack, the other thinks abundance. The circumstances may be identical, but the destinies unfold in opposite directions because the thoughts shaped the actions, and the actions shaped the results. Destiny is not decided in a single moment, but shaped by countless daily decisions, and each decision is influenced by the thoughts preceding it. When a person develops the discipline to guard their thoughts, they guard their destiny. This requires awareness, because the mind will often replay old narratives, stories of failure, fear, or unworthiness that were planted long ago. If left unchecked, these thoughts create invisible chains that keep a person stuck. But once you recognize that thoughts can be chosen, challenged, and replaced, you realize that your destiny is not fixed. It is flexible, waiting to be shaped by new patterns of thinking. Every time you choose a thought of resilience instead of defeat, of purpose instead of distraction, of possibility instead of fear, you are chiseling away at a new destiny, one that reflects the highest version of yourself. It is also important to understand that shaping your destiny through thoughts is not about wishful thinking or blind optimism. It is about aligning your internal reality with your external actions. Thoughts without action are wasted potential, but thoughts with conviction and discipline behind them become unstoppable. A person who consistently thinks, "I am capable of greatness," and then acts in alignment with that thought, will eventually produce greatness, even if they stumble along the way. The thought serves as a compass, guiding decisions, sustaining motivation, and fueling perseverance. Without that guiding thought, actions become scattered and inconsistent, but with it, every step becomes intentional, and every setback becomes fuel for growth. When you truly grasp that thoughts shape destiny, you begin to take responsibility for the conversations happening in your own mind. You stop allowing random negativity to dictate your mood, and you start deliberately feeding your mind with thoughts that expand your vision. You read books that stretch your imagination, surround yourself with people who challenge your limitations, and speak words that reinforce your purpose. You become a guardian of your mental environment, because you know that every thought you allow is either a brick building your future or a stone weighing you down. Over time, those bricks form the path you walk, and that path becomes the story of your destiny. Discipline is the lever of control, and without it, no amount of talent, intelligence, or ambition can truly be harnessed to its fullest potential. Discipline is the force that takes raw desire and converts it into consistent action. It is the bridge between goals and accomplishments, and it is the difference between people who dream of change and those who actually create it. Your brain naturally seeks comfort, pleasure, and ease. It is wired for survival, not success. And without discipline, those instincts will pull you into patterns of procrastination, distraction, and excuses. Discipline is what allows you to override the pull of comfort and take control of your decisions, your habits, and ultimately, your destiny. It is the lever that shifts you from being controlled by your impulses to being guided by your vision. And until you master it, you will always live beneath your potential. Discipline is often misunderstood as a form of restriction, but in reality, it is the highest form of freedom. A person without discipline is enslaved to their moods, their urges, and the opinions of others. They only work when they feel motivated, only chase dreams when it is convenient, and only show up when it is easy. This lack of control ensures that their destiny is left to chance. On the other hand, the disciplined individual takes control by showing up regardless of mood, by pushing forward even when it is uncomfortable, and by staying consistent even when the rewards are not immediate. In doing so, they gain freedom, the freedom to build wealth, to master skills, to create impact, and to design a future on their own terms. What looks like restriction on the surface is actually power beneath it, because discipline is the mechanism through which you take control of yourself before trying to take control of anything else. Think about every area of life where greatness is achieved, whether in business, athletics, art, or leadership, and you will find discipline at the core. The athlete disciplines their body with rigorous training long before they ever hold a trophy. The entrepreneur disciplines their mind with vision and relentless action long before they ever see profits. The artist disciplines their craft with hours of practice long before they ever receive applause. In each case, discipline is the lever that takes control away from fleeting emotions and places it into consistent action. No one feels like practicing every day. No one feels like working through setbacks and failures. No one feels like pushing through fatigue, rejection, or resistance. Yet those who understand that discipline is the lever of control do not ask their feelings for permission. They simply move in alignment with their purpose. Discipline is also the key to controlling the brain, because the brain's natural inclination is to conserve energy, to avoid discomfort, and to prioritize short-term gratification over long-term fulfillment. Left unchecked, this programming will cause you to settle, to quit early, and to justify mediocrity. But when you apply discipline, you interrupt that pattern. You tell your brain that vision comes before comfort, that purpose comes before pleasure, that progress comes before procrastination. Each time you make a disciplined choice, you weaken the hold of impulses and strengthen the muscle of control. Over time, your brain begins to adapt, learning to follow the commands of your discipline rather than dictating your behavior. This is why discipline is so transformational. It rewires the servant brain to obey your higher self instead of enslaving you to temporary urges. Another powerful truth about discipline is that it compounds. The small choices you make consistently stack up to create massive change. Waking up early one day doesn't change your destiny, but waking up early every day disciplines your body and mind to maximize time, focus, and productivity. Saving money once won't build wealth, but disciplining yourself to manage finances consistently will create freedom in the long term. Reading one book won't transform you, but making learning a disciplined habit will expand your mind beyond measure. The compound effect of discipline is unstoppable because it turns ordinary moments into extraordinary results. Each disciplined choice is like pulling on the lever, gaining more control, more influence, and more momentum in shaping your life. Discipline is also the great equalizer. Not everyone is born with the same level of talent, resources, or connections, but discipline levels the playing field. A disciplined person with average talent will outperform a talented person without discipline every single time. This is because talent without control is wasted, while discipline ensures that even small abilities are sharpened and multiplied through consistent application. Many people admire the achievements of successful individuals but overlook the discipline that made it possible, the countless hours unseen, the sacrifices made, the distractions resisted. Without discipline, talent rusts, dreams wither, and potential dies unused. But with discipline, even the smallest seed of ability can grow into a forest of influence. The lever of control that discipline provides is not only external but deeply internal. Discipline gives you control over your emotions, ensuring that anger does not ruin relationships, fear does not paralyze progress, and doubt does not sabotage opportunities. It gives you control over your habits, transforming destructive routines into constructive ones. It gives you control over your focus, allowing you to channel your energy into what truly matters instead of scattering it on distractions. When you master discipline, you are no longer a prisoner to circumstances or feelings. You become the architect of your life. And though discipline requires sacrifice in the moment, it always returns dividends that far outweigh the cost. Ultimately, discipline is the lever of control because it is the force that takes your vision and makes it reality. You cannot think your way into success without discipline, and you cannot wish your way into destiny without consistent, deliberate action. Discipline is what ensures that you keep showing up, keep building, keep striving, even when progress is invisible and results are delayed. It is what keeps you moving when motivation fades, when the path gets difficult, and when the reward seems distant. By gripping the lever of discipline, you take control away from chance and give it back to your choices, and that is where true power. Repetition is the tool through which the brain is rewired, and rewiring is the key to transformation. The human brain is a magnificent system of patterns, habits, and neural pathways that are built over time. Whatever you repeat, you reinforce, and whatever you reinforce, you eventually become. This is why change is never just about desire. It is about repetition. You cannot simply think a new thought once and expect your life to transform. You cannot make a single decision and assume your destiny has shifted. True change requires repetition, because the brain learns by consistent exposure. The pathways of fear, doubt, laziness, or negativity were not built in a day. They were built over years of repeated thinking, speaking, and acting. The only way to override them is by replacing them with new, empowering patterns and repeating them until they become automatic. Repetition works because the brain doesn't distinguish between what is real and what is rehearsed. If you continuously feed it a thought, whether positive or negative, it will eventually treat it as reality. This is why affirmations and visualization are not just motivational cliches. They are powerful tools for rewiring. When you repeat affirmations daily, your brain begins to create new neural connections that support that belief. When you visualize success repeatedly, your brain rehearses the feeling and the process of achieving it, so that when the opportunity arises, it feels familiar instead of foreign. The more you repeat, the stronger the connection becomes, and over time, that connection becomes the default pattern. Just as a path in the forest becomes clearer every time you walk it, so too does a thought or habit become dominant every time you repeat it. The reality is that repetition is already shaping you, whether you are conscious of it or not. Every day you repeat thoughts about who you are, what you can do, and what you deserve. If those thoughts are negative, then repetition is working against you. The inner dialogue of, "I can't, I'm not enough, I'll never make it," repeated often enough, becomes an unshakable belief that dictates your actions. But the same principle can work in your favor if you deliberately choose new thoughts to repeat. Instead of, "I can't," you replace it with, "I am capable." Instead of, "I'll never make it," you replace it with, "I will find a way." At first, the new thought feels awkward, just like carving a new trail through thick forest. But repetition clears the way, and eventually the old path of negativity grows over, while the new path of confidence becomes second nature. Habits work on the same principle. A single workout doesn't transform your health, but the repeated action of exercise rewires your body and mind to value strength and endurance. Saving money once doesn't build wealth, but the repeated habit of discipline with finances rewires your behavior to prioritize long-term freedom over short-term indulgence. Reading one book doesn't make you wise, but the repetition of feeding your mind daily rewires your perspective and multiplies your knowledge. Every transformation in life can be traced back to repetition, doing the right thing over and over until it becomes who you are. People often underestimate small habits because they seem insignificant in the moment, but the power of repetition is cumulative. Small disciplines, repeated consistently, create monumental change. Repetition is also the way you reprogram emotional responses. If your brain has been conditioned through repetition to respond to stress with anxiety, it can be rewired to respond with calm. If it has been conditioned to respond to rejection with self-doubt, it can be rewired to respond with resilience. The process is not instantaneous, because the old wiring will try to reassert itself. But every time you deliberately respond differently, every time you rehearse a new pattern, you are weakening the old connection and strengthening the new one. Eventually, the new response becomes automatic, proving that repetition is stronger than impulse. You are not locked into your past patterns, because repetition gives you the power to create new ones. The brain is like wet cement. It takes the shape of whatever is repeatedly pressed into it. For many people, the cement has hardened with the imprint of fear, failure, or scarcity. But even hardened cement can be broken and reset. It takes effort, persistence, and time. But the principle remains. Repetition reshapes the brain. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. What science confirms is what success has always required, that you must deliberately practice new patterns until they become natural. Whether it is training yourself to focus instead of being distracted, to act boldly instead of hesitating, or to persevere instead of quitting, repetition is the lever of rewiring. It is also important to understand that repetition is not just about doing something over and over. It is about doing the right things over and over. If you repeat negative patterns, you will reinforce failure. If you repeat destructive habits, you will strengthen dysfunction. But if you repeat empowering thoughts, disciplined actions, and purposeful behaviors, you will rewire yourself for greatness. The choice is always in your hands. You are already a product of repetition, of the voices you have listened to, the actions you have taken, the environments you have embraced. The only question is whether you will take control of repetition or allow it to continue shaping you unconsciously. Repetition is slow, but it is sure. That is why many people quit before the results show up. They underestimate the time it takes to rewire the brain. They want instant transformation without understanding that the old patterns have been repeated for years and will resist being replaced. But those who stay consistent eventually see the breakthrough, because repetition never fails. The person who disciplines themselves to repeat empowering thoughts daily eventually believes them. The person who repeats disciplined habits eventually embodies them. The person who repeats purposeful actions eventually creates a destiny aligned with those actions. The process may feel monotonous at times, but in the monotony lies the magic. Every repetition is a stroke of the sculptor's chisel, shaping your identity and carving your destiny. Emotions are indicators, not directors. And understanding this truth is one of the greatest steps toward maturity, clarity, and personal power. Far too often, people allow their emotions to dictate their decisions, and as a result, they end up living in cycles of regret, inconsistency, and self-sabotage. Emotions were never meant to be the steering wheel of your life. They were designed to be the dashboard. Just like the lights on a car dashboard, emotions signal what is happening internally, but they are not supposed to decide where you go. Fear might indicate that something feels uncertain. Anger might indicate that a boundary has been crossed. Sadness might indicate a loss or disconnection. And joy might indicate alignment with values. But none of these emotions were meant to command your choices. The problem arises when people confuse indicators with directors, letting emotions tell them what to do, instead of letting wisdom, vision, and discipline guide their actions. When you see emotions as directors, you become a slave to them. If fear directs you, you will always retreat from challenges that could grow you. If anger directs you, you will burn bridges that were meant to support you. If sadness directs you, you will stop moving forward when progress is still possible. If excitement directs you, you might chase impulsive decisions that lead to regret. Emotions as directors create instability because they shift constantly. What you feel today may not be what you feel tomorrow. And if your life is built on emotional guidance, your path will always be inconsistent and unpredictable. But when you train yourself to see emotions as indicators, you gain the ability to notice them without surrendering to them. You read the signal, but you keep your hands firmly on the wheel of decision. This doesn't mean emotions are bad or irrelevant. In fact, emotions are valuable because they reveal what is happening inside of you. Fear might reveal that you are stepping outside your comfort zone, which is often a sign of growth. Anger might reveal that you care deeply about justice, fairness, or boundaries, which can guide you to take thoughtful action. Sadness might reveal that you value connection and meaning, pushing you to seek healing or deeper relationships. Even negative emotions carry information, but the moment you allow them to dictate your behavior, they transform from helpful indicators into destructive directors. The goal is not to eliminate emotions, but to interpret them correctly and act according to purpose rather than impulse. And consider how many people have ruined opportunities because they let emotions lead. A person might quit a job in a moment of anger only to regret it when calm returns. Another might end a relationship because of temporary fear, only to realize they walked away from something meaningful. Others might chase short-term pleasure when they feel bored or lonely, only to pay long-term consequences. In each case, the emotion was real, but it was not supposed to be in control. The person misread the dashboard as a steering wheel, and the result was misdirection. But someone who understands that emotions are indicators would pause in those moments. They would acknowledge the emotion, ask what it is signaling, and then choose a response aligned with their higher vision. That pause creates power because it separates feeling from action and prevents temporary emotions from causing permanent damage. The disciplined mind uses emotions as fuel, not as commands. When fear shows up, it becomes a sign to prepare, to get sharper, and to step into courage. When anger rises, it becomes a signal to address injustice or misalignment with clarity and self-control. When sadness lingers, it becomes a signal to reflect, to heal, and to reconnect with meaning. When joy is present, it becomes a confirmation that something is right and worth continuing. In each case, the emotion informs but does not control. The person remains the driver, and the emotion is simply part of the dashboard providing feedback along the journey. This is the essence of emotional intelligence, the ability to notice and name emotions without being ruled by them, to harness their energy without surrendering to their control. The truth is, emotions are temporary, but the consequences of emotional decisions can be permanent. That is why learning to separate the two is critical for shaping destiny. Success in life is often less about talent and more about the ability to remain steady when emotions fluctuate. The investor who resists panic when the market dips. The leader who resists rage when criticized. The athlete who resists fear under pressure. These are the ones who rise to greatness because they understand that emotions cannot be the director of their performance. They read the signals but remain loyal to discipline and vision. Rewiring your relationship with emotions requires practice. It means training yourself to pause before reacting, to question the message behind the feeling, and to make decisions based on principle rather than passion. This is not suppression, because suppression ignores emotions altogether, while wisdom listens to them without obeying them. Suppression pushes emotions into the subconscious, where they grow toxic, but interpretation allows you to gain insight while still maintaining control. Over time, you learn to welcome emotions as useful feedback instead of fearing them or being enslaved by them. When you understand that emotions are indicators, not directors, you reclaim your authority. You stop saying, "I couldn't help it, I was just angry," or "I had to quit, I was too afraid," because you recognize that emotions did not force your hand. They only signaled something. You regain the ability to say, "I felt fear, but I chose courage. I felt anger, but I chose wisdom. I felt sadness, but I chose perseverance." This separation between feeling and choosing is what creates strength, stability, and growth. Instead of being tossed around by the storms of emotion, you become anchored in purpose, letting emotions serve their true role as indicators on your focus. Creates power because whatever you give your attention to multiplies. The human mind was not designed to operate at its highest level in a state of distraction. It was designed to achieve greatness through concentrated energy. When focus is fractured, energy is scattered, and scattered energy produces weak results. But when focus is directed, energy is concentrated, and concentrated energy creates breakthroughs. Imagine sunlight spread across a field. It warms but does not ignite. Now imagine that same sunlight intensified through a magnifying glass. It becomes fire. That is the difference between distraction and focus. Focus transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary impact because it channels all of your mental, emotional, and physical resources into a single direction. Without focus, even great talent remains untapped, but with focus, even ordinary abilities are elevated into something extraordinary. One of the biggest challenges in today's world is that people mistake busyness for productivity. They scatter their focus across endless tasks, notifications, and distractions, believing that doing more means achieving more. But doing more of the wrong things only drains energy without producing power. True progress is not measured by activity, but by effectiveness, and effectiveness is born from focus. A person who works with intense focus for 2 hours will achieve more than someone who spends 10 hours switching between distractions. This is why those who master focus rise above the noise. They stop trying to be everywhere at once and instead concentrate on the few things that matter most. By doing so, they unlock the power of depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and mastery over mediocrity. Focus also creates clarity, because when you discipline your mind to concentrate on a single aim, the path becomes clearer. Distraction clouds judgment with competing priorities, but focus cuts through the noise and reveals what truly matters. Without focus, you may pursue opportunities that look good but do not align with your purpose. With focus, you filter every decision through the lens of your vision, discarding what is irrelevant and seizing what propels you forward. This clarity saves you from wasted time, wasted energy, and wasted potential. Focus teaches you to say no to what does not serve your destiny, because every yes requires the power of your attention. The more you say yes to distractions, the weaker your power becomes, but the more you say yes to your focus, the stronger and sharper you grow. Another truth is that focus amplifies growth. Whatever you focus on expands. If you focus on problems, they appear larger and more intimidating. If you focus on solutions, opportunities multiply before your eyes. If you focus on fear, it grows until it paralyzes you. If you focus on faith, it grows until it empowers you. This principle works in every area of life. Focus on your health, and your habits begin to align with vitality. Focus on your relationships, and connection begins to flourish. Focus on your vision, and resources begin to align in your favor. It is not that opportunities were absent before. It is that your lack of focus blinded you from seeing them. When you direct your focus with discipline, you awaken power that was dormant within you all along. Focus is also what separates amateurs from masters. An amateur dabbles, constantly switching from one interest to another, never giving enough attention to develop depth. A master chooses one path and applies unwavering focus until they reach a level of excellence that commands respect and influence. Mastery is not about innate talent. It is about sustained focus over time. The musician who practices daily, the athlete who trains relentlessly, the leader who studies consistently, each of them becomes powerful because they understand that greatness is forged in the fire of focus. Without focus, skill remains shallow, but with focus, skill becomes artistry. Without focus, knowledge remains scattered, but with focus, knowledge becomes wisdom. Without focus, dreams remain vague, but with focus, dreams become destiny. Focus also creates resilience because it anchors you in purpose. Distractions are often invitations to quit, detours that pull you off course, or illusions that make you doubt your path. But when your focus is locked on your vision, you become unshakable. Obstacles still appear, setbacks still happen, but they do not derail you because your attention remains fixed on the goal. Focus turns challenges into fuel, because instead of seeing reasons to stop, you see reasons to adapt and continue. Many people fail, not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked focus. They allowed setbacks to distract them into abandoning their journey. Those who remain focused long after the excitement has faded are the ones who eventually experience the power of completion. Focus also compounds power over time. Just as repetition builds habits, focus builds momentum. Every time you return your attention to your vision, you strengthen your resolve. Every time you resist distraction, you sharpen your discipline. Over weeks, months, and years, this sustained focus creates a momentum that becomes nearly unstoppable. What once required immense effort becomes natural, because your mind has been trained to prioritize what matters most. This compounding effect explains why those who focus consistently often appear lucky to others. What people call luck is often the result of long-term focus creating opportunities that eventually burst into visible success. In relationships, focus creates connection. In leadership, focus creates trust. In creativity, focus creates innovation. In personal growth, focus creates transformation. There is no area of life that is not amplified by the power of focus. It is the foundation upon which discipline, resilience, and mastery are built. Without focus, you waste your energy fighting battles that don't matter. With focus, you channel your energy into building legacies that last. The truth is that power does not come from doing everything. It comes from doing the right things with relentless focus until they bear fruit. Mastering the inner dialogue is one of the most important disciplines a person can ever develop, because the most powerful voice in your life is not the one that comes from others. It is the one that comes from within. Every day, your mind speaks thousands of words to you, shaping the way you see yourself, interpreting the world around you, and influencing every decision you make. If that inner dialogue is dominated by negativity, fear, and limitation, then it becomes nearly impossible to rise above mediocrity, no matter how much external motivation you receive. But if that inner dialogue is filled with faith, clarity, and determination, then you become unstoppable, because you are no longer relying on outside voices to validate you. You carry power and guidance within yourself. Mastering this inner conversation means taking control of the narrative in your mind, refusing to be sabotaged by destructive self-talk, and deliberately replacing it with language that builds, empowers, and aligns with your purpose. The challenge is that for most people, the inner dialogue has been conditioned by the past. From childhood, words spoken by parents, teachers, friends, and society plant seeds that grow into internal conversations. If you were told repeatedly that you weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough, those words became part of the script your brain replays even in adulthood. You may find yourself standing in front of opportunities, but the inner dialogue whispers, "You can't do this, you'll fail, you're not ready." And if you don't master that voice, you believe it, and your actions shrink to match its limitations. This is why so many talented people never fulfill their potential. Their outer world is full of possibilities, but their inner world is full of sabotage. Mastering the inner dialogue means recognizing that not every thought in your head is truth, and not every voice in your mind deserves attention. When you take control of your inner dialogue, you start by becoming aware of what it's saying. Many people live on autopilot, unaware of the constant stream of self-talk shaping their emotions and actions. They wonder why they feel anxious, insecure, or unmotivated, not realizing that their mind is replaying negative scripts all day long. Awareness is the first step because you cannot master what you do not notice. Once you become aware, you can begin to challenge and rewrite the script. Instead of allowing thoughts like, "I'm not capable," to go unchallenged, you confront them with new declarations like, "I am equipped, I am learning, I am growing." Over time, these new words replace the old ones, rewiring your brain to serve a new narrative. The inner dialogue you master today becomes the confidence, courage, and clarity you walk in tomorrow. It is also important to understand that mastering the inner dialogue does not mean silencing every negative thought forever. Negative thoughts will still appear, but mastery means you refuse to let them dominate. Think of it like a conversation with multiple voices. One voice says you can, another says you can't. Mastery is the ability to choose which voice you give authority to. You may feel fear, but you choose to amplify the voice of courage. You may feel doubt, but you choose to strengthen the voice of faith. You may feel weary, but you choose to align with the voice of perseverance. The inner dialogue will always present options, but mastery means you decide which words become commands and which words are dismissed as noise. The power of the inner dialogue is that it shapes identity, and identity shapes destiny. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes who you believe you are, and who you believe you are determines what you do. If your inner dialogue constantly tells you that you are weak, you will act weak. If it constantly tells you that you are strong, you will act strong. If it constantly tells you that you are a victim, you will live defeated. If it constantly tells you that you are a victor, you will rise to challenges with resilience. The brain takes cues from the language you feed it, and your body, emotions, and decisions follow. This is why athletes visualize victory and speak affirmations before competition, why leaders declare vision with confidence, and why successful people guard their self-talk. They understand that their inner dialogue is either their greatest ally or their worst enemy. Another element of mastering the inner dialogue is consistency. One positive statement is not enough to overwrite years of negative programming. Just like any skill, mastery comes through repetition. If your inner dialogue has been rehearsing defeat for years, you must deliberately rehearse victory every day until it becomes natural. This might mean writing affirmations, speaking them aloud, meditating on empowering truths, or surrounding yourself with environments that reinforce the right narrative. Each repetition strengthens new neural pathways, and over time, the old negative scripts weaken. What once felt unnatural, speaking life over yourself, becomes your default mode of thinking. Mastery is not achieved in a single moment, but through consistent training, just like mastering a sport, an instrument, or a craft. Mastering the inner dialogue also requires discipline to guard against external voices. The words you consume from others, whether through conversations, media, or culture, can influence your self-talk. If you constantly surround yourself with negativity, gossip, or criticism, those words seep into your inner dialogue and reinforce destructive scripts. But if you surround yourself with uplifting voices, empowering environments, and purposeful content, your inner dialogue is reinforced with strength and clarity. You cannot completely control what others say, but you can control what you allow to take root in your own mind. Mastery means becoming the gatekeeper of your inner world, filtering every word and refusing to let poison settle in your thoughts. When you finally master the inner dialogue, you step into alignment with purpose. You no longer need external validation to feel capable because your inner voice affirms your worth. You no longer allow setbacks to define you because your inner voice reminds you of resilience. You no longer surrender to fear because your inner voice is louder with faith. You carry within you a source of motivation, encouragement, and clarity that cannot be taken away by circumstances. This inner mastery becomes a constant source of power, because no matter what happens outside of you, you are equipped with the right conversation happening inside of you. And when the voice inside you says, "I can, I will, and I must," nothing outside of you can stop you from moving forward.